I'll never forget the night I met Marco. The air was electric, thick with the scent of paint and anticipation as I wandered through the bustling art gallery. It was one of those evenings where everything felt alive. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the vibrant colors of the paintings splashed across the walls. As I took in the atmosphere, I felt a magnetic pull toward one particular piece, a striking mural that seemed to pulse with emotion. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice interrupted my thoughts, pulling my gaze away from the canvas. I turned to see a tall man with tousled dark hair and a smattering of paint on his shirt. His eyes sparkled with a mix of passion and nervousness, and I couldn't help but smile. Yes, it's incredible. Who's the artist? I asked, intrigued. Guilty as charged, he said with a playful grin. I'm Marco. From that moment, we fell into an easy conversation. Marco spoke about his inspiration for the mural, the struggles he faced as an artist, and his dreams of making a name for himself. I was captivated by his honesty and passion, so different from the pretentious conversations I was used to in my own social circle. He was refreshingly real, and with every word, I felt an undeniable connection blossoming between us. As the night wore on, I found myself drawn to him more than I had ever anticipated. We talked about art, our dreams, and our shared love for creativity, losing track of time as the gallery slowly emptied around us. When it was finally time to leave, I felt a pang of regret, wishing I could prolong our connection. Can I see you again? He asked, his expression hopeful. Absolutely, I replied, my heart racing. The following weeks were a whirlwind. We spent every spare moment together, exploring the city, visiting art shows, and indulging in late-night conversations that stretched into the early hours. Marco introduced me to a world I had only glimpsed through the lens of my sheltered upbringing. He showed me the beauty of raw talent and authenticity, far removed from the polished veneer of my affluent lifestyle. But as I fell deeper for Marco, I couldn't shake the nagging worry about how my family would react. They were pillars of the community, known for their social status and wealth. My father, a successful lawyer, and my mother, a socialite, had high expectations for me. I often wondered what they would think of my choice to date someone from a more modest background. The day finally came when I gathered the courage to introduce Marco to my parents. I wanted them to see the man I had fallen for, to understand the depth of his character beyond his financial situation. But as I pulled into our driveway that evening, I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach. The sprawling mansion loomed ahead, its grandeur feeling suffocating in contrast to the warmth I found with Marco. Are you ready for this? Marco asked, glancing at me with concern. I took a deep breath, hoping to project confidence despite my unease. I am. Just be yourself. We stepped into the house, and the familiar scent of my mother's cooking wafted through the air, momentarily calming my nerves. My parents greeted us with their usual warmth, but I noticed the flicker of judgment in their eyes as they took in Marco's casual attire, jeans and a paint-splattered t-shirt, a stark contrast to the tailored suits and designer dresses that filled our home. Lily, who's this? My father asked, raising an eyebrow. This is Marco, Dad. He's an artist. I said, my heart pounding. An artist? My mother repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. How charming. And what do you do for a real job, Marco? I felt my stomach drop. Marco's expression hardened for a moment before he smiled politely. I'm working to get my art out there. I have a show coming up next month. Art can't pay the bills, my father scoffed, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. What's your backup plan? I bristled at the dismissive tone in my father's voice. Dad, you don't even know him. Marco is incredibly talented. His work deserves recognition. Talent doesn't pay the rent, Lily. My mother interjected. You need to be realistic. You have so much potential. You shouldn't waste it on a man who doesn't have a proper career. The air in the room thickened with tension, and I could feel Marco's discomfort. I looked at him, his eyes reflecting a mix of anger and hurt, and I knew I had to defend him. Mom, you don't understand, I said, my voice rising slightly. Marco is passionate and hardworking. He's not just some failure. He's following his dreams, and I admire that. That's all well and good, my father said dismissively, but dreams won't buy you a house or put food on the table. A silence settled over us, heavy and suffocating. I felt trapped, caught between my love for Marco and the expectations of my family. My heart raced as I realized just how deeply my parents' opinions affected me. Maybe you're right, Marco said quietly, breaking the tension. But at least I'm trying. It's more than I can say for many people. I could see the determination in his eyes, but my parents seemed unfazed. They exchanged knowing glances, as if they were assessing the damage of this unfortunate encounter. The night spiraled downward from there, filled with stilted conversation and thinly veiled insults. After dinner, Marco and I retreated to the porch, the cool night air a welcome relief from the heat of the confrontation inside. I could feel the frustration boiling inside him. I didn't mean to put you in that position, he said, running a hand through his hair. I thought your family would be more supportive. It's not your fault, I replied, leaning against the railing. They're just set in their ways. They've always valued status and money over everything else. But do they really think that about me? That I'm just some unambitious guy? I sighed, torn between wanting to defend Marco and the fear of what my family's opinions could mean for our relationship. They don't see what I see in you. They only care about appearances. Maybe you should reconsider if this is worth it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. No, I insisted, taking his hand in mine. I won't let them dictate my happiness. I love you, Marco. He looked at me, his expression softening. I love you too, Lily. But I don't want to be the reason you lose your family. Our gaze lingered, the weight of the night's events hanging between us. I could feel the truth of his words settle in my heart, a whisper of doubt that threatened to unravel everything we had built. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let fear drive a wedge between us. The next few days were filled with awkward family dinners and strained conversations. My parents continued to pressure me about Marco, emphasizing their disdain for his background. I tried to brush it off, but their words weighed heavily on my conscience. One evening, as we sat in the living room, my father broached the subject again. You know, Lily, your cousin is getting married next month. I'd like you to bring a date. I felt a chill creep down my spine. Dad, I'm seeing someone. Is it that artist again? He asked, a hint of irritation in his voice. His name is Marco. I corrected, my irritation flaring. And yes, I am seeing him. My mother scoffed. Lily, you can't seriously think this is going to last. You're wasting your time on someone who can't offer you a future. I could feel my frustration bubbling to the surface. Why does it matter so much to you? I'm happy with Marco. Isn't that what matters? What matters is your future, your career, and being with someone who can match that, my father said, his tone final. I clenched my fists, the anger surging within me. Maybe I don't want someone who's just like you. Maybe I want someone who's real, someone who understands me. Real? My mother exclaimed, her voice incredulous. What kind of future do you think you'll have with a man like that? I stood up, my heart racing. I don't want to have this conversation anymore. I'm tired of your judgment. The air crackled with tension as I stormed out of the room, my parents' voices trailing behind me, laced with disbelief and anger. I felt a mix of determination and despair. How could they not see how much Marco meant to me? Days turned into weeks, and the pressure mounted. I found myself increasingly torn between my love for Marco and my loyalty to my family. One night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. I needed to confront my parents once and for all. The following Sunday, I gathered my courage and invited Marco to dinner again. As we prepared for the evening, I could sense the tension in the air. Marco's hands trembled slightly as he set the table, and I tried to reassure him with a gentle smile. Are you sure about this? He asked, his eyes searching mine. I have to stand up for us, I replied firmly. I won't let them dictate my happiness anymore. As we entered the dining room, my parents greeted us with forced smiles. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable. I could see the way they scrutinized Marco, their judgments hidden behind polite masks. Dinner began, and the conversation flowed uneasily. I watched as my parents subtly belittled Marco, making comments about his career choice and attempting to corner him with questions about his finances. Do you think you'll ever make a living from your art? My father asked, feigning interest. Marco maintained his composure. I believe in my work, and I'm committed to making it successful. That's admirable, but let's be realistic. My mother chimed in, her voice condescending. A backup plan is essential. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and anger. Can we not do this tonight? I interjected, my voice sharper than I intended. Do what? Have a discussion about your future? My father replied, his tone dismissive. This isn't about me. It's about Marco, I said, frustration spilling over. He's not some project for you to critique. Is that how you see him? My mother asked, her gaze piercing. A project? You're throwing away your future for this boy. The room fell silent, the tension thickening like fog. I could feel Marco's discomfort, but I refused to let it stand. No, he's not just a boy. He's a man who works hard and believes in himself, I said, my voice rising. And if you can't see that, then maybe you don't deserve to have a say in my life. Lily, don't be dramatic, my father warned, his voice low. Dramatic? I echoed incredulously. You're the ones being dramatic. You want me to abandon someone I love because you're afraid of what people might think. Your happiness is important, but so is your future, my mother insisted. You need stability, Lily. This isn't a fairy tale. I felt the walls closing in around me. This is my life, not yours. I'm tired of living under your expectations. Then maybe you need to reconsider what's important to you. My father shot back, his tone icy. With that, the conversation spiraled into chaos. My parents hurled insults and dismissals at Marco, painting him as nothing more than a failure. In a moment of defiance, I stood up from the table, my heart pounding. I can't do this anymore, I said, tears stinging my eyes. I love Marco, and if you can't accept that, then I don't want to be a part of this family. The room fell silent, and I felt the weight of their disbelief wash over me. I turned to Marco, who looked at me with a mix of concern and admiration. Let's go, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. As we walked out of the house, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The pain of leaving my family behind was real, but so was the joy of standing up for my love. As we drove away, I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, one that would require strength, resilience, and unwavering commitment. Little did I know, the challenges ahead would test us in ways I never imagined. Leaving my family's house felt like stepping off a cliff, plunging into the unknown. Marco and I drove in silence, the weight of my decision pressing heavily in the air. I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of my childhood fade away. Each block we passed felt like a reminder of the life I had just walked away from, a life filled with expectations and the kind of love that came with conditions. Are you okay? Marco asked, breaking the stillness. His voice was soft, laced with concern. I turned to him, taking in the way his brow furrowed with worry. Yeah, I didn't realize how hard that would be. It's like I've lost my family and my home all at once. I can't imagine how difficult that must be, he said, his hand reaching for mine. But I want you to know that you're not alone in this. I'm here for you. His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and for the first time since our confrontation, I felt a flicker of hope. Thank you. I just need some time to process everything. As we settled into our new routine, I threw myself into work. I was determined to prove to myself and to my parents that I could build a life outside of their expectations. I started taking on freelance projects, channeling my creativity into designs that reflected who I truly was. It felt liberating to create without the burden of judgment hanging over me. Marco, too, was pouring his heart into his art. He transformed our small living room into a makeshift studio, the walls soon adorned with vibrant canvases. I loved watching him work, the way his passion ignited every brushstroke. But I could see the weariness in his eyes. The reality of being an artist meant constant uncertainty, and I often wondered if the pressure to succeed weighed heavily on him. One evening, after a long day, I came home to find Marco sitting at the table, staring at his latest piece. The painting was hauntingly beautiful, a landscape that captured both darkness and light. But there was something in the way he held his brush that told me he was struggling. "Hey," I said, softly approaching him. "What's going on?" He sighed, putting the brush down and running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I'm just feeling a bit lost. I thought getting my work out there would help, but it's hard to find the right opportunities." I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "What if we set some goals? Maybe we could look for shows together or apply to local galleries." He looked up at me, a hint of gratitude in his eyes. "You really think that would help?" "Absolutely," I replied, a smile breaking across my face. "You have an incredible talent, Marco. The world deserves to see it." In the weeks that followed, we worked as a team, brainstorming ways to showcase Marco's art. I reached out to local galleries, sending emails, and arranging meetings. Slowly, we began to see small victories. Marco's work was accepted into a community exhibition, and the excitement between us was palpable. As the exhibition approached, however, the pressure intensified. I could see the toll it was taking on Marco. He spent hours painting, refining his pieces until they were perfect. I worried that he was pushing himself too hard, but every time I mentioned it, he brushed it off, determined to make this opportunity count. The night of the exhibition arrived, and I could hardly contain my excitement. We arrived at the gallery early, the energy in the air buzzing with anticipation. Marco's pieces were prominently displayed, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling in my chest. As people began to filter in, I watched Marco interact with visitors, his face lighting up as they admired his work. I was struck by how far we had come together, how much we had both grown since I had left my family behind. This was our life now, a life built on our terms. But as the night wore on, I noticed a few familiar faces lurking in the crowd, my parents. My heart raced as I caught sight of them, dressed impeccably as always, their expressions a mix of surprise and disbelief. I felt my stomach drop. What were they doing here? I turned to Marco, my anxiety rising. "I think my parents just walked in." His eyes widened, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay?" "I don't know. I didn't expect them to come. They've never shown any interest in my life before." "Do you want me to talk to them?" he offered, his support unwavering. "No," I replied, shaking my head. "I need to handle this myself. Just give me a moment." As I approached my parents, I could feel the weight of their disapproval in the air. They exchanged glances, their judgment palpable. "Lily," my mother said, her tone clipped, "this is quite a surprise. We didn't know you were involved in the art community." "Surprise," I said, forcing a smile. "This is Marco's exhibition. I'm so proud of him." "Marco," my father said, extending his hand, but his expression was still cold. "We met briefly at dinner. I didn't realize you were so serious about your art." I bristled at his tone, but held my ground. "Marco is an incredible artist. He's worked really hard to get here." My mother looked around the gallery, her eyes narrowing at the eclectic crowd. "You could have invited us to this. It would have been nice to support you." "I didn't think you'd want to come," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've made your feelings about Marco very clear." "Feelings? We simply want what's best for you, Lily," my father interjected, his voice rising slightly. "This isn't a world we want you to be a part of. You need stability, not this chaos." Before I could respond, Marco appeared by my side, his presence a calming anchor. "Thank you for coming," he said, extending a hand to my parents. "I appreciate you taking the time to see my work." "Quite the impressive display," my mother replied, her tone softening just a touch, but I could still sense the underlying skepticism. "We've heard a lot about you, Marco." "Good things, I hope," Marco said, his humor lightening the tension. "Enough of this." My father cut in, his voice stern. "Lily, we need to talk. This isn't a place for family discussions." I felt a flash of anger at my father's condescension. "We can talk later, Dad." Right now, I want to support Marco. This is his night. Supporting him means supporting failure. He shot back, his voice low and threatening. You need to wake up and see that this is not the life we envision for you. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My heart raced as I tried to process the hurt and anger flooding through me. I couldn't believe they had the audacity to come here to belittle the person I loved in front of everyone. Enough! Marco stepped forward, his voice firm. I respect your opinions, but Lily is her own person, and she deserves to follow her heart. I don't want her to feel like she has to choose between us. My parents exchanged shocked glances, their expressions shifting to outright hostility. Do you see this, Lily? My mother said, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. This is what we mean by chaos. You're letting him manipulate you. I stepped back, feeling overwhelmed. No one is manipulating me. I love Marco, and I'm proud of him. If you can't accept that, then I don't know what else to say. The conversation spiraled, voices raised as my parents pressed their case against Marco, criticizing his choices and belittling his dreams. My heart sank deeper with each passing moment, torn between my family and the love I felt for Marco. Finally, with emotions running high, I decided to step away from the confrontation. I can't do this right now, I said, my voice breaking. I'm done arguing. I'm here to support Marco tonight, and if you can't respect that, then maybe it's time for you to leave. With that, I turned on my heel, seeking refuge among the crowd. I could feel their eyes on me, heavy with disappointment and anger, but I wouldn't let their negativity taint this moment. As I stood away from my parents, taking a moment to breathe, I felt Marco's presence beside me again. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that, he said softly. You didn't deserve it. I leaned into him, grateful for his support. I didn't expect them to come. I thought I was done with that part of my life. You're not done. It's part of your story, but you're not defined by them, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. You have a future ahead of you, one that you're building for yourself. As the night continued, I found solace in Marco's presence. I watched as people admired his work, their praise igniting a fire within me. I felt proud of him, and that pride reminded me why I had fought so hard to be with him. After the exhibition, Marco and I celebrated over dinner, the tension from earlier slowly fading away. We laughed, reminiscing about our journey together and how far we had come. But I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents would never let this go. They would continue to fight for their version of my life, a version that didn't include Marco. As the weeks turned into months, I focused on my work, determined to make a name for myself in the design world. I found joy in my projects, pouring my creativity into every design. But I could feel the shadow of my parents looming over me, their voices echoing in my mind. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk, working on a new project, I received a message that made my heart race. It was from a major design magazine, offering to feature one of my designs in their upcoming issue. I felt a rush of excitement, but also anxiety. What would my parents say? Would they take this as a chance to criticize my choices again? Hey, what's got you smiling? Marco asked, leaning against the doorway, a playful grin on his face. I just got a message from a magazine. They want to feature my work, I exclaimed, unable to contain my excitement. Lily, that's amazing, he said, his eyes shining with pride. You've worked so hard for this. But what if my parents find out? I can already hear them saying I'm just doing this for attention. I said, the anxiety creeping back in. Forget about them, Marco said, stepping closer. This is your moment. You deserve this recognition, no matter what they think. He was right. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my worries start to lift. You're right. I'm going to own this. That evening, we celebrated at a small cafe where we shared our dreams and ambitions. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by Marco's unwavering support. But just as I began to feel secure in my decision to embrace my independence, the reality of my family's influence loomed closer than I expected. One morning, as I sat in my favorite coffee shop, I received a call that would change everything. Lily, it's your father. His voice came through the line, terse and formal. Dad, what is it? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. We need to talk, he said. It's important. I felt my heart race, an instinctive fear flooding through me. About what? Your mother and I have a situation that requires your attention, he replied, his tone clipped. Can you meet us? Where? I asked, my mind racing. The country club. We'll be waiting. As I hung up, unease settled in my gut. What could be so important that they needed to see me? I glanced at Marco, who was sitting across the table, sensing my anxiety. What's wrong? He asked, concern etched on his face. My dad wants to meet. Something about a situation. I replied, my voice shaking slightly. Do you want me to come with you? Marco asked, his protective instincts kicking in. No, I said, shaking my head. I need to face them on my own. I'll be fine. But as I drove to the country club, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping back into a world I had tried so hard to leave behind. I parked my car and took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever confrontation awaited me. As I entered the club, the polished interior felt overwhelming. My parents were already seated at a table, and as I approached, I could see the tension in their posture. Thank you for coming, my father said, his tone serious. What's going on? I asked, crossing my arms defensively. My mother glanced at my father, then back at me. We've had a bit of a setback. Go on, I urged, my heart pounding. It's about our investments. We've encountered some financial issues, and our reputation has taken a hit, my father explained, his voice tight. I felt a rush of confusion. What does this have to do with me? We need your help, my mother said, her voice softer now. We're facing pressure from the board, and we could use your connections in the design world to help us navigate this. My mind raced. You're asking me for help after everything you said about Marco and my life choices? This is different, Lily. We're family, my father said, his expression earnest. We need to come together, especially now. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The same people who had dismissed my love and my choices were now asking me for assistance. I felt a surge of anger bubble to the surface. You've made it clear how you feel about my life, and now you want to pretend that doesn't matter? I shot back, my voice trembling with emotion. You've rejected me for so long, and now you want me to be part of your world again? Please, we're not here to discuss that, my father said, frustration creeping into his tone. This is about business. I leaned back in my chair, disbelief washing over me. You want me to help you save your business after you've cut me off? After you disowned me? My mother reached out, her expression pleading. Lily, we're sorry for how things have been. This isn't about that. We're desperate. I shook my head, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over me. You can't just erase what's happened. You can't expect me to put my life on hold to fix your problems. But as I looked into their eyes, I could see the cracks in their facade. The pressure of their situation was weighing on them, and for the first time, they looked vulnerable. Maybe this is a chance to start over, my father said, his voice softer now. We've all made mistakes. I took a deep breath, weighing my options. I could feel Marco's support in my heart, his belief in me lighting a path forward. Let me think about it, I said, my voice steady. As I walked away from the country club, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. My parents had reached out, and I was left to confront my feelings about them and my life with Marco. Would I continue to fight for my love, or would I help my family at the cost of everything I had built? The choices ahead would test my strength, but I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to face whatever came next. The drive home from the country club felt heavier than ever. My mind raced with conflicting emotions, anger, disappointment, and a flicker of something else that felt uncomfortably close to hope. My parents' desperate plea for help had caught me off guard, and I found myself questioning everything I had fought for since I left their home. As I pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I wanted to talk to Marco about what had happened, to lay it all out on the table and hear his perspective. He had always been my anchor, the person who understood me without judgment. Hey, I'm home. I called out as I stepped inside, the familiar warmth of our apartment wrapping around me like a comforting hug. Welcome back. Marco's voice echoed from the living room. I found him sitting on the couch, surrounded by sketches and paint tubes, the remnants of his latest project scattered around him. How did it go? He asked, looking up with a hopeful expression. I sank onto the couch beside him, running a hand through my hair. It was intense. They're facing some serious financial issues, and they want my help. Marco's eyebrows knitted together. Help with what? I explained everything. How my parents had approached me, their desperation, and the sharp sting of their past disapproval still fresh in my mind. Can you believe it? I extreme frustration spilling over. After everything, they want me to fix their problems. It's like they think I can just turn it all around for them without acknowledging how they treated me. I can't say I'm surprised, Marco replied thoughtfully. They've always seemed more concerned with appearances than with your happiness. But it's a big ask, Lily. Are you considering it? I don't know. I admitted, my voice wavering. Part of me wants to help them. I know what it's like to feel lost and desperate. But the other part of me feels like they haven't changed. They still see me as a project instead of their daughter. Marco leaned in closer, his expression serious. You need to do what feels right for you. Remember why you chose to be with me in the first place. You have to protect that part of yourself. His words resonated deeply within me. The life I had built with Marco was filled with love, authenticity, and the freedom to pursue my dreams. I couldn't let my parents' expectations undermine everything I had worked for. Over the next few days, I wrestled with my decision. I poured myself into my design work, using it as an outlet for my swirling emotions. The magazine feature was set to publish soon, and I wanted to be ready. I craved a sense of accomplishment, something to remind me of my own worth outside of my family's shadow. But the weight of my parents' requests lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled in two different directions. Every time I picked up my phone, I hesitated, knowing that their calls could come at any moment, and I was unsure of how to respond. One evening, as I sat in our living room working on a project, Marco walked in holding a stack of flyers. Guess what? I got accepted into a local art fair. His excitement was contagious, and I couldn't help but smile. Marco, that's amazing. I cheered, getting up to embrace him. You deserve this. Thanks. I want you to be there with me, he said, his eyes sparkling. It's a chance to showcase my work to a bigger audience, and I want you to help me set everything up. As the night wore on, I helped him organize his pieces, arranging them in a way that highlighted his talent. The joy of seeing Marco's art come to life filled me with excitement, a reminder of the passion we shared. But as I watched him prepare for the fair, I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. I had been so focused on my own battles that I hadn't fully acknowledged his needs. Hey, I said, pausing to look at him. Are you nervous about the fair? A little, but I'm more excited than anything, he admitted, glancing at his artwork. This is a big opportunity, and I want it to go well. It's just, I wish my family could be here to see it. I felt my heart ache for him. You know they don't deserve to be part of this. You've worked so hard, and it's your moment to shine. Yeah, but it still stings a little, he said, his voice thoughtful. It's hard to forget the people who've always been there, even if they haven't supported me in the way I needed. I understood that pain all too well. I know. I'm still trying to process everything with my parents. It's like I'm caught between wanting to help them and wanting to protect myself. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you, he said, taking my hand. We're a team, remember? That night, we stayed up late, laughing and planning for the art fair. It felt good to focus on the future instead of the turmoil of my family's demands. With every passing moment, I felt more grounded in my relationship with Marco. But as the fair drew closer, I received a message that rattled me. My mother reached out, asking to meet. I hesitated, torn between my desire to avoid conflict and the obligation to respond. Do you think I should go? I asked Marco, anxiety creeping into my voice. What if they try to manipulate me again? I think it's important for you to set boundaries, he said firmly. If you feel like they're just going to pressure you into helping, then you have every right to say no. I weighed his words carefully, feeling the tension building within me. Maybe I could go and just be honest about how I feel. If they push, I'll walk away. Trust your instincts, he encouraged. You know your parents better than anyone. Just remember that you have a choice now. With that in mind, I agreed to meet them, steeling myself for what was to come. When the day arrived, I felt a knot of apprehension twist in my stomach. I donned my favorite dress, one that made me feel confident, hoping it would provide me with some semblance of strength. Arriving at the cafe, I spotted my parents at a corner table, their expressions a mix of eagerness and anxiety. I approached cautiously, unsure of how this meeting would unfold. Lily, my mother said, her voice tinged with a false sweetness that set my nerves on edge. Thank you for coming. Let's just get to the point, I said, sitting down. What did you want to discuss? My father exchanged a glance with my mother before he spoke. We've been thinking about what we discussed at the country club. It's been a rough few weeks for us, and we realized how much we need family support. Family support, I echoed, skepticism lacing my voice. After everything that happened, you think I can just jump back into being your daughter after you disowned me? Lily, please, my mother said, her tone shifting to one of desperation. We're trying to apologize for how we treated you. We know we made mistakes. And we want to rebuild our relationship, my father added. We're sorry for how we treated Marco. We didn't understand his value. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. You want to rebuild? Is that what you call it? Because it sounds to me like you're just asking for a favor. My mother leaned in, her expression earnest. We want to show you that we're changing. We've realized how much we took for granted, and we want to be part of your life again. And you think I'm just supposed to accept that? After years of being dismissed, I shot back, my heart racing. You didn't care about my happiness until it became convenient for you. Lily, we're not here to fight, my father said, his voice low. We genuinely want to fix things. We need your help with our business situation. If you're willing to lend us your expertise in design, it could really help us regain some stability. I took a deep breath, trying to process their request. So, you want me to come in and fix everything for you, while you continue to ignore my needs and feelings? No, that's not what we meant, my mother said quickly. We're not asking you to fix everything. We want to involve you in our business, to support you and your career. The irony of their words was not lost on me. And what do you think that means for me? You've spent years dismissing my life choices, and now you expect me to just step back into your world. We've all grown, haven't we? My father insisted. We can work together to find a solution. This could be a new beginning. But all I could feel was resentment simmering beneath the surface. You can't just ignore the past and expect me to play along like everything is fine. I need you to understand that I'm not the same person I was before. We want to support you, Lily, my mother said, her voice softening. We want to be there for you, but we need your help, too. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. What if I don't want to help? What if I want to focus on my own life, on Marco and my career? You have a choice, my father replied, his tone suddenly defensive. But if you choose not to help us, then don't expect us to be there when you need us. Those words struck me like a punch to the gut. You're threatening me? After all this? We're not threatening you, my mother said, her voice shaking. We're just asking you to consider the family you could still have. Is that really what you think? That I want to return to being the daughter you molded into someone I'm not? I said, my anger spilling over. I won't be a part of your plan if it means sacrificing my happiness again. The air between us crackled with tension, and I could see the realization settling over their faces that they were losing me again. Lily, please, my father said, desperation creeping into his voice. We're trying to do better. We've realized how important family is. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. You've only realized that when it's convenient for you. This isn't about family. This is about control. With that, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel their eyes on me, a mix of shock and regret. I can't do this. I won't be manipulated into helping you just because you're in trouble. As I walked away, I felt a rush of liberation mixed with heartbreak. I had finally stood up for myself. But at what cost? The weight of their expectations had threatened to pull me back into a life I was desperately trying to escape. That evening, Marco could sense my turmoil when I returned home. "What happened?" he asked, his voice gentle as he pulled me into a hug. "I told them no," I said, my voice shaky. "I couldn't let them pull me back in. They think they can just erase the past and ask for my help without acknowledging how they treated me." Marco held me tighter, his warmth grounding me. "You did the right thing, Lily. You deserve to stand your ground." "I know, but it hurts. They're my parents," I whispered, feeling the tears spill over. "I want to help, but I can't sacrifice everything I've built with you." "Your happiness matters more than their approval," Marco said firmly. "You've come so far, and I admire your strength." As the days turned into weeks, I focused on preparing for the art fair. Marco worked tirelessly, fueled by excitement and determination. I found solace in being part of his journey, helping him finalize his pieces and strategize for the event. The day of the fair finally arrived, and I felt a surge of adrenaline as we set up his booth. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, fellow artists and patrons filling the space. I watched Marco interact with visitors, his enthusiasm infectious as he shared his passion for art. As people admired his work, I felt pride swelling in my chest. This was what I had fought for: Marco's happiness and our shared dreams. But as the event unfolded, my phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from my mother, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I opened it. "Lily, we need to talk. Things are worse than we thought. Please come see us." My heart raced as I stared at the screen. They were desperate, but I had just made a stand against their manipulation. The thought of returning felt like stepping back into a trap. I glanced at Marco, who was lost in conversation with a group of admirers. I felt torn between two worlds: the life I had built with him and the toxic ties of my past. As the fair continued, I made a decision. I wouldn't let my parents' chaos disrupt the happiness I had found. I chose to stay focused on Marco's success, and I wanted to celebrate this moment without the weight of my family's drama. The evening wound down, and Marco's booth was a success. He sold several pieces, and the joy on his face was contagious. "I can't believe how well this went," he exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "You deserve every bit of it," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me as I watched him celebrate. "I'm so proud of you." But as we began to pack up, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from my mother, and I felt a heaviness settle in my chest. "Please, Lily, we need you now more than ever." As I read the words, I felt the walls of my world closing in. I wanted to ignore it, to push the message aside and focus on the incredible night we had just experienced. But deep down, I knew I couldn't completely sever the ties. My parents were still a part of me, no matter how much I wanted to pretend otherwise. "Are you okay?" Marco asked, noticing my distant expression. "Yeah, just thinking," I said, trying to mask my inner turmoil. "About them?" he asked gently. I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I just don't know what to do. I've fought so hard for my independence, and now they're reaching out again." "Remember why you left," he reminded me, his voice steady. "You need to protect what you've built with me, and you don't owe them anything if they're just going to pull you back into their mess." As we finished packing, I felt a surge of determination. Marco was right. I had to stay true to myself. I wouldn't let my parents dictate my future any longer. But as I walked to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that my decision was far from over. I had taken a stand, but the battle with my family was just beginning. The next few days passed in a blur as I continued to throw myself into my work, but my parents' messages haunted me. I ignored them, trying to focus on the life I had created with Marco, but every time my phone buzzed, my heart would race with anxiety. Then came the day that changed everything. I was in the middle of a design project when I received an urgent call from Marco. "Lily, can you come to the studio? It's important." I could hear the urgency in his voice, and I immediately felt a sense of dread. "What happened?" Just come, please, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I rushed over, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, Marco was pacing back and forth, his expression grave. There's something I need to show you. He led me into the studio, where he had set up his latest artwork. But it wasn't just the piece that caught my attention. It was the scattered newspapers and articles lining the walls. What is this? I asked, confused. Look closer, he urged, pointing to an article that detailed a major scandal involving my parents. They're in serious trouble, Lily. I scanned the headlines: rumors of financial fraud, mismanagement of funds, and a public relations nightmare. My heart dropped as I realized the gravity of the situation. I can't believe this, I said, feeling sick to my stomach. How could they let it get this far? They might be reaching out to you again for help, Marco said, concern etched across his face. I think they're desperate. I don't want to get pulled back into their chaos, I said, my voice shaking. I've fought too hard to find my own path. Lily, I know, but if they're truly in trouble, it's important to consider how this might affect you, he said gently. They could leverage their situation against you. My mind spun with conflicting thoughts. I couldn't ignore what was happening. It felt like a storm was brewing on the horizon, and I was caught in the middle of it. Maybe I should talk to them, I said slowly, uncertainty creeping in, just to see what's going on. Are you sure that's what you want? Marco asked, concern lacing his voice. They've hurt you before. I know, I replied, taking a deep breath. But I need to know what's happening. If I don't, I'll always wonder. Okay, he said, his voice steady. Just remember to protect yourself. As I left the studio, I felt a rush of determination mixed with trepidation. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but I had to face whatever lay ahead. The ties to my past were still there, and I had to confront them if I wanted to move forward. When I arrived at my parents' house, I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. The weight of their previous actions hung in the air like a thick fog, but I pushed through, determined to face whatever awaited me inside. Lily, my mother exclaimed, opening the door. Her eyes were wide with relief, but I could see the stress lines etched on her face. What's going on? Asked, my voice steady. We need to talk, she said, leading me inside. My father was waiting in the living room, his expression grave. I took a deep breath, ready to confront whatever chaos awaited me. The confrontation with my family was far from over, and I knew that the choices I made now would shape the future for all of us. Tell me everything, I demanded, prepared to stand my ground and face the storm head on. The air inside my parents' home felt suffocating as I stepped into the living room. The familiar decor, the expensive furniture, the carefully curated art on the walls, felt like a facade hiding the chaos brewing underneath. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she motioned for me to sit down, while my father leaned against the mantel, his arms crossed, the tension radiating off him like heat waves. Lily, we're grateful you came, my mother said, her voice wavering. We need to explain what's been happening. I took a seat, crossing my arms defensively. I want to know the truth. I saw the articles. You're in serious trouble. My father's face hardened, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. It's not as simple as it looks. Yes, there are challenges, but we've handled worse. Worse, I echoed incredulously. You're being accused of financial fraud. This is serious. How did it get this far? We made some mistakes, but we're working to rectify them, my mother said, her voice trembling. We thought we could keep it under control, but it spiraled out of our hands. And now, we need your help. I felt a rush of anger. My help? After everything you said about me and my life? You've treated me like I was worthless, and now you want me to come running back to fix your problems. My father stepped forward, desperation clear in his tone. This isn't just about us anymore, Lily. If we don't manage this situation properly, it will affect you too. Our business, our reputation, it all hangs in the balance. I scoffed, disbelief flooding my senses. And you think I want to associate with you after how you've treated me? You can't just sweep everything under the rug and expect me to play nice. Please, my mother pleaded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. We know we've been difficult. We've realized that we took you for granted, but we're family. We need to work together. Family? I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You mean a family that disowned me when I chose a different path? A family that only cares about their image? We didn't know how to react, my father admitted, running a hand through his hair. We're scared and we made mistakes, but we're asking for a chance to make it right. My heart raced with conflicting emotions. I wanted to scream at them, to throw their words back in their faces. But a part of me still yearned for the connection I had once felt with them, for the familial bond that had shaped my upbringing. Why should I help you? I challenged. You've made it clear that you don't respect my choices or my life. We want to respect you, my mother insisted, her voice quaking. But we need your insight, especially with your design skills. We're working on rebranding and improving our image to get us through this mess. I sighed heavily, my thoughts swirling. And what happens after? What happens when this blows over? You think I'll just step back into your lives like nothing happened? We hope that this could be a turning point, my father said, his voice pleading. A chance for us to rebuild our relationship. I felt the tears prick at the corners of my eyes. You don't get to decide that. You can't just decide to be a family again after you cut me off. I've built a life without you, and it's one that I'm proud of. We know we can't undo the past, my mother said softly, her gaze fixed on me, but we're willing to make changes to be better. Please, let us show you that we can support you too. Their desperation was palpable, and I felt my heart soften slightly at the sight of their vulnerability. Maybe they were truly scared. Maybe they genuinely wanted to change. But the scars of their past actions still felt too fresh, too raw. I need time to think about this, I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I can't just jump back into your world. We understand, my father replied, relief washing over his features. Just know that we're here, ready to support you in any way we can. I nodded, but my mind was still racing. As I left their house, I felt a mix of anger and sadness swirl within me. I had hoped for some closure, but all I felt was confusion. The bond one had once yearned for now felt fraught with tension, and I didn't know if it could ever truly be repaired. When I got home, Marco was waiting for me, concern etched on his face. How did it go? I slumped onto the couch, feeling utterly drained. They're in trouble. Financial trouble. They want me to help with their rebranding and their image. They think they can just win me over after everything that happened. Marco sat beside me, taking my hand in his. What do you think? Are you considering it? I don't know. I admitted, my voice breaking. Part of me wants to help them. I can see that they're scared. But another part of me feels like I'd be sacrificing everything I've worked for. You have to protect what you've built, Marco said gently. You're not responsible for their choices or their mistakes. Your happiness comes first. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. You're right. I just don't want to feel like I'm turning my back on them entirely. That's a tough position to be in, Marco said, his thumb rubbing soothing circles on my hand. But remember that it's okay to prioritize yourself and your happiness. You don't owe them anything. Over the next few days, I wrestled with the weight of my parents' request. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a tightrope, teetering between two worlds. I knew Marco was right. I had to prioritize my own happiness. But every time I tried to push my parents out of my mind, guilt would creep in. I remembered the days of family dinners, the laughter we once shared, and the love I had craved for so long. One evening, as I sat down to work on a design project, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from my mother, asking if I had made a decision. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Do you want me to respond? Marco asked, sensing my hesitation. No, I need to do this myself, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll respond later. As the days turned into weeks, I kept putting off the conversation, feeling the pressure build within me. My parents' financial issues continued to spiral, and every time I opened my phone, there were more articles detailing their struggles. I tried to focus on my work, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Marco and I continued to build our life together, but I could feel the storm brewing in the distance, threatening to engulf everything we had worked for. Then, one day, I received a call from a local gallery inviting me to showcase my designs in an upcoming event. Excitement surged through me, the feeling of validation washing away some of my lingering doubts. Lily, that's amazing, Marco exclaimed when I told him the news. You deserve this opportunity. We need to celebrate. We spent the evening planning how to showcase my designs, excitement filling the air. I felt a renewed sense of purpose as I immersed myself in my work, determined to make the event a success. But the looming weight of my parents' situation hung over me like a dark cloud. Every time I turned my attention to my designs, guilt gnawed at me, reminding me of the request that still lingered unanswered. As the night of the event approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I wanted to enjoy the moment, but the knowledge that my parents were in crisis kept pulling me back. I had to confront them soon. The evening of my showcase arrived, and I felt a rush of adrenaline as I set up my designs in the gallery. Marco was by my side, helping me arrange everything just right. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, and I could see a crowd beginning to form. This is it, Marco said, his eyes shining with pride as he took a step back to admire our work. You've put your heart into this. As the event kicked off, I watched as people began to admire my designs, their compliments fueling my confidence. I felt a sense of fulfillment that I had been striving for, a feeling that reaffirmed my choice to pursue my passion. But in the back of my mind, the looming threat of my parents' financial ruin hung over me. Just as I began to relax, my phone buzzed with a message that sent my heart racing. It was from my mother. Lily, we're at the gallery. We need to talk. My breath caught in my throat. They had come to my event, uninvited. The tension within me surged, and I felt my stomach drop. I turned to Marco, my eyes wide. They're here. Are you okay? He asked, concern flooding his voice. I don't know, I replied, my heart pounding. I need to face them. Do you want me to go with you? Marco asked, his expression earnest. No, I said, shaking my head. I need to do this on my own. I need to set boundaries. As I walked toward the entrance, I felt a mix of determination and dread. I spotted my parents near one of my designs, their expressions a blend of awe and apprehension. Lily, my mother said, her voice softening as she approached me. We wanted to see your work. It's truly impressive. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease slightly, but I couldn't let my guard down completely. Thank you, but I'm not here to discuss my designs. I need to talk to you about everything. My father stepped forward, his expression serious. We know we need to address what's happening. We just wanted to show you that we're trying to support you, even if it's hard for us. Support, I echoed, disbelief creeping in. You think showing up here is enough? You still haven't taken responsibility for how you've treated me. We're trying to make amends, my mother said, her voice tinged with desperation. We've realized we should have supported your choices. We're sorry. I need more than just words, I replied, my heart racing. If you want to rebuild, then it has to be genuine. I can't just step back into your lives without seeing real change. My father's expression hardened. You're being too harsh, Lily. We're here, aren't we? Can't you give us a chance? Chance. I shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. You've had your chance, and you've squandered it. The tension between us was palpable, and I felt the eyes of the crowd on us, a mix of intrigue and discomfort. I couldn't let this moment define my showcase, but I also knew I had to stand my ground. I can't keep doing this, I said, my voice steady. I won't help you unless I see that you genuinely want to change. I deserve that. With that, I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of the confrontation hung in the air, but I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I had stood up for myself, and I wouldn't let their past mistakes pull me back into their world. As I rejoined Marco, his expression was a mix of pride and concern. You handled that so well, he said, pulling me into a hug. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. I just wish it didn't have to be like this. I admitted, feeling the tears prick at my eyes. I wanted to enjoy tonight without their drama overshadowing everything. You deserve to enjoy this moment, Marco said, holding my gaze. No matter what's happening with them, this is your time to shine. The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter and applause, with people admiring my designs and offering compliments. But in the back of my mind, the knowledge that my parents were still struggling weighed heavily on me. As the event came to a close, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion. I had poured my heart into my work, and the recognition felt amazing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over yet. Just as I was packing up, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my mother, and I hesitated before opening it. Lily, we need to talk again. Please come to the house tomorrow. It's urgent. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I stared at the screen. I couldn't ignore their plea, but I felt a deep-seated anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. I had fought so hard to find my own path, but the ties to my family were still pulling me back in. As I glanced at Marco, I felt a surge of determination. I wouldn't let their struggles consume me. I had a life to build, and I needed to focus on my future. Tomorrow, I'll go, I said, steeling myself for whatever confrontation awaited me. But I won't be drawn back into their chaos. I have to protect what I've built with you. Marco nodded, his expression serious. Just remember, no matter what happens, I'm here for you. We're in this together. As the night came to an end, I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. My parents' situation was far from resolved, and I would have to confront the truth of our relationship. But I also knew that I wouldn't face it alone. I had Marco by my side, ready to weather the storm together. Tomorrow would be another test of my strength, and I was determined to come out stronger on the other side. The following day felt like an impending storm, the atmosphere charged with anxiety as I prepared to face my parents again. I stood in front of the mirror, taking a deep breath, trying to steady the racing thoughts in my mind. I wanted to feel confident, but doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. What would they say? Would they manipulate me again? Are you ready? Marco's voice pulled me from my thoughts as he walked into the room, a look of concern etched across his face. I nodded, forcing a smile. I think so. I just wish I knew what to expect. You've got this, he said, wrapping his arms around me. Just remember to stay true to yourself. You've made so much progress, and you can't let them take that away from you. As we drove to my parents' house, my heart raced with every passing moment. The streets that had once felt so familiar now seemed to loom ominously, a reminder of everything I had tried to escape. Each stoplight felt like an eternity, and I found myself lost in thought, replaying the last conversation with my parents over and over in my mind. When we arrived, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me. The house was exactly as I remembered, opulent, polished, a display of wealth and status. But as I stepped inside, that nostalgia quickly dissipated, replaced by a cold, suffocating atmosphere. Lily, my mother called, her voice echoing through the foyer. We're in the living room. I glanced at Marco, who gave me an encouraging nod, and we walked together toward the sound of her voice. My father was already seated, his expression unreadable. Thank you for coming, my mother said, her eyes searching mine as if trying to gauge my mood. We appreciate it, especially after everything. Let's just get to it, I replied, crossing my arms. What's going on? We have some updates regarding the situation. My father began, his tone serious. Things have escalated since we last spoke. My stomach twisted with anxiety. What do you mean? There's been significant media attention on our company due to the allegations, he explained, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. We're facing potential lawsuits that could devastate us. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had heard rumors, but hearing it confirmed felt like a dagger to my heart. What does that mean for you? For me, it means we need to act fast, my mother interjected, her voice rising slightly. We're going to rebrand the company, but we need your help, Lily. Your expertise in design could really make a difference. I felt my frustration bubbling to the surface. You can't just come to me when it's convenient. You've treated me like an outcast for so long, and now you want me to step in and fix your mess? We didn't realize the severity of the situation until it was too late, my father said, his expression earnest. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for your skills. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about you too. If our company goes under, it will affect your career opportunities. The pressure of his words pressed down on me, and I felt my heart race. And you think I'm just supposed to jump back into this family dynamic after everything? You don't get to dictate my choices anymore. Lily, please, my mother said, her voice trembling. We're trying to repair the damage. We realize we've made mistakes, and we want to do better. But you can't expect me to just forget the past. I shot back, my anger flaring. I've fought so hard to distance myself from this life, and now you want me back in it. This is about survival, my father insisted, his voice firm. We need to show the public that we're capable of change. You can be part of that change. A sense of dread washed over me, and I felt trapped between my desire to help and my need to protect my newfound independence. I don't know if I can do this, I said, my voice shaking. I can't just sacrifice everything I've built with Marco. Marco stepped forward, his presence a comforting anchor. You don't have to decide right now, Lily. It's okay to take your time and think about what you want. I glanced at him, his supportive gaze grounding me in a moment of chaos. But they're asking for my help. How can I turn my back on them if it truly is a matter of survival? They've taken so much from you already, Marco replied, his tone gentle but firm. You have every right to prioritize yourself. You're not obligated to save them just because they're your family. My parents exchanged glances, their expressions tense. We know we've made mistakes, but we can't undo the past, my father said. We can only ask for your help moving forward. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. What if I help you with the rebranding? But it has to be on my terms. I won't be pulled back into your world completely. My mother's eyes widened, and I could see the hope flickering in her gaze. That's all we're asking for, a chance to prove ourselves. We'll do whatever it takes to make it work. Then let's talk specifics, I said, my voice steadying. But I need to be clear. I won't tolerate any manipulation. I need to feel like my work is valued. Of course, my father agreed, nodding earnestly. We're grateful for this opportunity. As we began discussing plans for the rebranding, I felt a mix of determination and anxiety. It was an opportunity for me to contribute while also standing my ground. I could use my skills to help them, but I wouldn't let them pull me back into their lives completely. Over the next few weeks, we worked together, outlining a plan for the rebranding. I poured myself into the project, determined to make a difference and show them that I had value. Marco was my constant support throughout the process. He encouraged me to stay focused on my goals and reminded me that I was in control. We spent countless evenings brainstorming ideas and refining designs, our bond growing stronger as we faced this challenge together. But despite the progress we made, I could feel the tension lingering beneath the surface. My parents were still the same people they had always been, and I couldn't shake the feeling that their desperation was coloring their actions. One evening, as I worked late in the studio, I received another call from my mother. Lily, can you come over? We need to discuss the rebranding details. Can it wait? I replied, exhaustion creeping into my voice. I'm in the middle of a project. It's important, she insisted, her tone urgent. Please just come. I sighed, glancing at Marco, who was working on his own projects. I'll be back soon, I said, trying to mask my apprehension. When I arrived at my parents' house, I was greeted with a tension that felt heavier than ever. They were seated at the dining table, papers spread out in front of them. Thank you for coming, my mother said, her voice shaky. We've been working on the rebranding plan, and we wanted to get your input. I took a seat, eyeing the documents in front of me. What have you come up with? As they began presenting their ideas, I felt a familiar frustration rise within me. They spoke about flashy marketing tactics and strategies that felt disingenuous. This isn't going to work, I said, shaking my head. You can't just throw money at the problem and expect people to buy it. You need to show real change. But this is how it's done in business, my father countered, his voice rising defensively. We can't just change everything overnight. Maybe you should consider that you need to do more than just change your image. I replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. You need to change how you treat people. Otherwise, this is just another attempt to save face. My parents exchanged glances, their expressions tightening. We're trying, Lily, my mother said, her voice wavering. We're working to make things right. Trying isn't enough. I shot back, feeling the anger bubbling over. You need to show real commitment to change, not just a new logo. The tension in the room escalated, and I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I can't keep doing this if you're not willing to make real changes. I won't sacrifice my values for the sake of your image. With that, I stood up, ready to leave. I can't keep having these conversations if you're not willing to listen. Lily, please don't go, my mother pleaded, her voice cracking. We need your guidance. I'm here to help, but I need you to meet me halfway, I said, my heart racing. If you want me to stay involved, then you have to show me that you're serious about change. As I left their house, I felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. I had stood my ground, but the path ahead felt more uncertain than ever. I knew I had a choice to make, and I needed to stay true to myself. When I returned home, Marco was waiting for me, concern etched on his face. How did it go? I slumped onto the couch, the weight of the evening crashing down on me. It was intense. They still don't get it. They think they can just throw money at the problem without changing their attitudes. Lily, you're doing the right thing, Marco said, taking my hand. You're setting boundaries, and that's important. You can't compromise your values. I know, I replied, feeling the tears prick at the corners of my eyes. But it's hard to see them struggling. I want to help, but I can't lose myself in the process. You won't lose yourself, he reassured me. You're stronger than they realize, and you're building a life that reflects who you truly are. Over the following weeks, I focused on the rebranding project, pouring my energy into making it a success. I found a sense of fulfillment in my work, and I could feel my confidence growing. But the pressure of my parents' situation continued to weigh heavily on me. I received calls from them more frequently, each time asking for my input and guidance, but I struggled with the feeling of being pulled back into their world. As we approached the deadline for the rebranding launch, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I wanted to succeed, to prove to my parents that I could contribute meaningfully, but I also wanted to protect my own happiness. One evening, as I sat down to finalize the presentation materials, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my father, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. We need to talk. It's urgent. I hesitated, anxiety flooding my senses. What now? I muttered under my breath. Marco looked up from his work. What is it? It's my dad again, I said, feeling a sense of dread. He wants to meet. He says it's urgent. Do you want me to go with you? Marco asked, concern etched on his face. No, I said firmly. I need to face this on my own. I can't let them pull me back into their chaos. As I drove to my parents' house, I felt the familiar weight of tension settling in my chest. The stakes felt higher than ever, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would change everything. When I arrived, my parents were waiting in the living room, their expressions grave. Thank you for coming, my father said, his voice low. What's going on? I asked, crossing my arms. There's been another development, my mother said, her tone shaky. The media has intensified their scrutiny, and we need to respond quickly. Respond how? I shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. You can't just keep spinning this without addressing the real issues. We're preparing a press conference, my father explained. We need you to help us with the messaging and the presentation. Me? I echoed, disbelief flooding my senses. Why would I help you after everything? Because this is our chance to show that we're committed to change, my mother said, her voice pleading. We need to demonstrate that we're taking responsibility. I felt my heart race, torn between my desire to help and my fear of being pulled back into their world. What if I don't want to be involved? What if I don't want to be a part of this anymore? We're asking for your expertise, Lily, my father insisted, desperation creeping into his tone. We can't do this without you. I stared at them, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. You've treated me like an outcast for so long, and now you want me to step in and fix your problems? What's in it for me? This is about more than just us, my mother said, her voice trembling. This affects your future too. If we can't recover, it will impact your career opportunities. Their words cut deep, and I felt a rush of anger mixed with guilt. I'm not responsible for your choices. I'm trying to build a life for myself, and I won't let you drag me back down. We're not trying to drag you down, my father said, his tone softening. We're asking for your help, but it's also an opportunity for you to show what you can do. You can help shape the narrative. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the room thicken. I need time to think about it. I can't make a decision right now. As I left their house, I felt a mix of frustration and resolve. I had stood my ground, but the weight of their expectations hung heavy on my shoulders. I knew that whatever choice I made next would shape my future, and I had to be careful not to lose sight of who I was in the process. That evening, as I shared my thoughts with Marco, he listened intently, his expression thoughtful. You're not obligated to help them, he said, his voice steady. You've already given them a chance. I know, I replied, my heart racing. But I can't ignore the fact that they're struggling. It's hard to turn my back on them completely. I understand, Marco said gently, but you have to prioritize your own happiness. If helping them means sacrificing what you've built, then it's not worth it. As I lay in bed that night, I replayed our conversation in my mind. I felt torn between the desire to help my parents and the need to protect my own future. The stakes were higher than ever, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the choice I made next would define everything. The following days were filled with uncertainty. I kept putting off responding to my parents' request, trying to buy myself time to think. But as the pressure mounted, I realized I couldn't avoid it forever. Finally, the day of the press conference arrived. I had agreed to assist with the messaging, knowing that I couldn't turn my back on them entirely. But as I stood in the back of the room, watching the chaos unfold, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. The reporters were gathered, the air thick with tension as my parents prepared to address the media. I could see the fear in their eyes, and I felt a surge of protectiveness toward them despite everything. As they stepped up to the podium, I felt my heart race. This was it. My parents were facing the consequences of their actions, and I was about to be a part of it. Thank you all for being here today, my father began, his voice steady but laced with apprehension. We are here to address the recent allegations and to assure you that we are taking full responsibility for our actions. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. They were trying to salvage their reputation, but would it be enough? As we move forward, we are committed to transparency and to rebuilding trust with our stakeholders, my mother added, her voice trembling slightly. We recognize that our mistakes have caused harm, and we are working diligently to make things right. The questions from the media came flying in, sharp and probing. I watched as my parents fielded the inquiries, their confidence wavering under the pressure. I felt my own anxiety rise with each question they struggled to answer. When the press conference finally concluded, I could see the weight of the world on their shoulders. They turned to me, their expressions a mix of relief and desperation. Thank you for your help, Lily, my father said, his voice filled with gratitude. We couldn't have done this without you. I hope this leads to real change, I replied, my heart racing. But remember, I won't be pulled back into your world completely. I need to focus on my own future too. As I left the venue, I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. I had stood by my parents during a pivotal moment, but I also felt the weight of my own choices pressing down on me. When I returned home, Marco was waiting for me, his expression a mix of concern and support. How did it go? It was intense, I admitted, sinking onto the couch. They handled the press conference, but I still worry about them falling back into their old habits. You did what you could, Marco said gently. You helped them, but you also need to focus on yourself. You're not responsible for their choices. I nodded, feeling a sense of resolve building within me. I know, and I'm done feeling guilty for wanting to live my own life. I deserve happiness, just like they do. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to pour my energy into my design work and my relationship with Marco. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, one that was rooted in my own happiness rather than the expectations of others. But just as I began to feel secure in my choices, I received another message from my mother. Lily, we need to talk. It's urgent. The weight of those words sent a chill down my spine. I could feel the storm brewing on the horizon, and I knew that whatever lay ahead would test my resolve once more. I glanced at Marco, who was watching me with concern. What do you think it is? I asked, anxiety creeping in. I don't know, but whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone, he said, taking my hand. We'll get through it together. As I prepared to face my parents again, I felt a surge of determination. I wouldn't let their chaos pull me under. I had fought too hard for my independence, and I was ready to stand my ground once more. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to confront whatever came my way. The moment I received my mother's message, a familiar knot twisted in my stomach. Lily, we need to talk. It's urgent. The words echoed in my mind, setting my heart racing. I had thought that by helping them with the rebranding and the press conference, I had stepped into a position of control. Yet here I was again, feeling like I was being pulled into their storm. As I sat on the couch with Marco, the tension in the room was palpable. What do you think they want this time? I asked, glancing at my phone again, as if the message might change or offer some reassurance. I don't know, but whatever it is, it sounds serious, Marco replied, his expression thoughtful. Just remember that you're not responsible for their choices, and you don't have to let them dictate your life. I know, I said, running a hand through my hair. But I can't ignore them either. They're my parents. True, but that doesn't mean you owe them anything beyond what you choose to give, Marco said gently. You've made a life for yourself, and you should protect that. I nodded, appreciating his support. I knew he was right. The last thing I wanted was to slip back into the old dynamics where my parents controlled my choices. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Okay, I'll go see them. But I won't let them pull me back in. I need to set boundaries. Just be careful, Marco cautioned. And remember, I'm here for you. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this. The drive to my parents' house felt like an eternity. Each turn and intersection reminded me of the struggles I had faced in this place, the expectations that had suffocated me. As I parked in the driveway, I felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on my shoulders. When I entered the house, the air was thick with tension. My parents were waiting in the living room, their expressions serious. Thank you for coming, Lily, my father said, motioning for me to sit. We need to discuss the situation. Is this about the financial troubles? I asked, crossing my arms. What now? Yes, but it's more than that, my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. There's been an unexpected development. What kind of development? I pressed, my heart racing as I prepared for the worst. My father glanced at my mother, then back at me. We received notice that the investigation has expanded. They're looking into our business dealings more closely, and we may face additional legal challenges. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? Are you saying you could face criminal charges? It's possible, my father admitted, his voice steady, but laced with worry. We're doing everything we can to cooperate, but the media is relentless, and the scrutiny is intensifying. I felt a rush of frustration. And you think I can just step in and fix this? You've made it clear how you feel about my life choices, and now you want my help. We're not asking for a handout, my mother said urgently. We're asking for your expertise. If we can't show that we're taking this seriously, it will ruin us. We want to change, but we need your help to guide us. I shook my head, disbelief flooding my senses. You think I can just forget how you've treated me and jump back into this mess? What's in it for me? Lily, we're not asking for your forgiveness. We're asking for a chance to make things right, my father said, his voice lowering. You're talented, and your insights can make a real difference in how we navigate this. By using me as a pawn, I shot back, my heart racing. What makes you think I want to be involved in this at all? Because this affects you too, my mother interjected, her voice rising slightly. If our business collapses, it will impact your career and future. We want you to be successful, but we can't do this without you. I felt the walls closing in, and my frustration boiled over. You think I can just step back into the role of the dutiful daughter after everything? You have no idea how hard I've fought to build my own life, separate from your expectations. Then help us build something better, my father pleaded. We need your insight to show that we're capable of change. It's not just about us. It's about creating a future for you too. My mind spun with conflicting thoughts. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them how hurtful their past actions had been. But deep down, I could see that they were scared, desperate to fix the damage they had caused. Fine, I said, my voice steadying as I made a decision. I'll help you with the rebranding, but it has to be on my terms. I won't let you manipulate me into this. Thank you, Lily, my mother said, relief flooding her features. We appreciate your willingness to help. But understand this. I will not sacrifice my own happiness or my relationship with Marco. If this starts to feel like I'm losing myself again, I'm walking away. My father nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. We understand. We want to make this work for everyone. As we began discussing the rebranding strategy, I felt a mix of determination and anxiety. I would use my skills to help them, but I wouldn't allow them to pull me back into their world completely. In the following weeks, I poured my energy into the rebranding project, crafting a new image that reflected genuine change rather than superficial adjustments. I worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and determination. Marco was my anchor through it all, encouraging me to stay focused on my goals while also reminding me to prioritize my well-being. I would often return home to find him waiting for me with a warm meal and a smile, his support grounding me as I navigated the complexities of my parents' situation. But the pressure of the rebranding weighed heavily on me. I could feel the tension building, and I wondered if my parents would truly follow through on their promises of change. Every meeting felt fraught with uncertainty, and I often caught myself questioning whether I was making the right choice. One evening, as I sat down to review the latest materials for the press release, my phone buzzed with another message from my father. We need to talk. It's important. I felt a wave of apprehension wash over me. Marco, my dad wants to meet again. I'm not sure I can handle more of this. Just remember what you've said, he replied, his voice steady. You're not responsible for their actions. You've been doing so well, and it's okay to set boundaries. As I drove to my parents' house, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. Each turn reminded me of the struggles I had faced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting could change everything. When I arrived, my parents were waiting, their expressions serious. Thank you for coming, Lily, my mother said, motioning for me to sit. We need to discuss the next steps. What's going on? I asked, bracing myself for whatever news awaited me. There's been a development, my father said, his voice tense. The press is picking up on the story, and we need to be prepared for a public response. Are you saying we need to do another press conference? I asked, my heart racing. Yes, he admitted. But this time, we want you to be involved in the messaging. We need to show that we're committed to change, and your voice could help. I felt a surge of frustration. And what if I don't want to be involved in this anymore? I can't keep putting myself in the line of fire for your mistakes. This isn't just about us, my mother said urgently. This is about your future too. If we fail, it will impact everything you've worked for. I took a deep breath, feeling my resolve waver. But what if I don't believe you? What if I don't trust that you'll follow through on these changes? We understand your hesitation, my father replied, his expression earnest. But we're trying to prove that we can be better, and we need your help to make that happen. I glanced at them, the tension in the room palpable. I'll help, but only if you commit to real change. I can't be a part of this if it's just another attempt to save face. My mother nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. We promise, Lily. We want to do this the right way. As we began planning the next steps, I felt a mix of determination and trepidation. I wanted to believe in their commitment to change, but I couldn't shake the fear that I might be setting myself up for disappointment once again. The days leading up to the press conference were filled with intense preparation. I poured myself into crafting a message that conveyed genuine remorse and a commitment to transparency. I wanted to help them communicate that they were serious about making amends. But as the conference approached, I felt a growing sense of dread. What if this didn't work? What if the media continued to scrutinize them and I was dragged down with them? On the day of the press conference, I arrived at the venue early, my heart racing as I took in the bustling crowd. Reporters were gathered, their cameras and microphones ready, and I felt the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. "Lily, you ready?" My father asked, his voice steady, but laced with anxiety. I took a deep breath, nodding. "Let's do this." As we stepped up to the podium, I felt the eyes of the crowd on us, their expectations palpable. I glanced at my parents, and for a moment, I felt a surge of hope. We could do this together. "Thank you all for being here today," my father began, his voice steady. "We're here to address the recent allegations and to reaffirm our commitment to change." As the questions began to roll in, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I watched as my parents fielded the inquiries, and I felt a sense of pride swelling within me. They were trying, and I had to give them that. But just as the press conference began to gain momentum, I noticed a group of reporters whispering to one another, their expressions dubious. The tension in the room shifted, and I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. "What do you say to those who doubt your sincerity?" one reporter shouted, cutting through the murmurs. My mother paused, her expression tightening. "We understand the skepticism, and we're committed to proving ourselves. We're here to listen and to change." But as the questions continued to fly, I could see the cracks in their facade. My parents struggled to maintain their composure, and I felt a rush of anxiety flood through me. When the press conference finally concluded, the atmosphere in the room felt charged with uncertainty. My parents turned to me, their expressions a mix of gratitude and worry. "Thank you for your help, Lily," my father said, his voice sincere. "We couldn't have done this without you. I hope this leads to real change," I replied, my heart racing. "But I can't be dragged back into this if you're not serious." As I left the venue, I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. I had stood by my parents during a pivotal moment, but I also felt the weight of my own choices pressing down on me. The storm I had been navigating wasn't over yet, and I had to prepare for whatever came next. In the following weeks, I continued to work on the rebranding project, pouring my energy into making a meaningful impact. But the pressure of my parents' situation still hung over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a tightrope, balancing between their expectations and my own happiness. Then one evening, I received another message from my father. "Lily, we need to talk. It's urgent." The familiar knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. I glanced at Marco, who watched me with concern. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I need to do this alone." As I drove to my parents' house, I felt a rush of determination wash over me. I wouldn't let their chaos pull me under. I had fought too hard for my independence, and I was ready to stand my ground once more. When I arrived, my parents were waiting in the living room, their expressions grave. "Thank you for coming, Lily," my mother said, her voice shaking slightly. "We need to discuss what's next." "What's going on?" I asked, crossing my arms. "There's been another development," my father said, his tone serious. "We've received a notice that we may face criminal charges due to the ongoing investigation." The weight of his words crashed down on me, and I felt my heart race. "What does that mean for you?" "For us, it means we need to prepare for a potential legal battle," my mother said, her voice trembling. "We need your help more than ever." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. "I can't keep doing this. You're asking me to step in and save you again, and I won't be a pawn in your game." "We're not asking you to save us," my father insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "We need your insight and support to navigate this situation." "I'm done being your safety net," I said, my voice steady. "I can't keep sacrificing my happiness for your mistakes." As I stormed out of their house, I felt a mix of anger and relief. I had stood my ground, but the weight of their expectations continued to haunt me. I was determined to protect what I had built with Marco, no matter what. As I got into my car, I felt tears prick in my eyes. I had fought so hard to carve out my own path, and I wouldn't let my parents pull me back into their chaos. I was ready to face whatever came next, but I knew I had to remain true to myself. Later that evening, Marco was waiting for me at home, his expression a mixture of concern and support. "What happened?" he asked, pulling me into a comforting embrace. "I just can't do it anymore," I said, my voice breaking. "They're still trying to pull me back into their world, and I refuse to let that happen." "Lily, you're stronger than they realize," Marco said gently. "You've come so far, and you deserve to live your life on your own terms." As the days turned into weeks, I focused on my work, pouring my energy into the designs I had always loved. I started to feel a renewed sense of purpose, one that was rooted in my own happiness rather than my parents' expectations. But the storm was far from over. I received a call from my father one day, and I felt my heart race as I picked up the phone. "Lily, we need to talk," he said, his voice heavy. "It's urgent." "What now?" I asked, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I can't keep doing this." "This time it's different," he insisted. "Please, just hear me out." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. "Feeny, what is it?" "There's been a breakthrough," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "We've hired a legal team, and they believe we have a chance to fight these allegations. But we need your help with the rebranding." I felt a surge of confusion and frustration. "What do you mean?" "I'm not your PR team." "I know, but this is important," he said, urgency creeping into his voice. "We need to show the public that we're serious about making changes. Your voice matters in this." "I can't be a part of this if it means sacrificing my own happiness," I replied, my voice shaking. "We're not asking you to sacrifice anything," my mother interjected, her tone pleading. "We're just asking for your insight." As I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of anger and determination wash over me. I had fought so hard to find my own path, and I wouldn't let my parents' chaos pull me back into their world. Later that night, as I shared my thoughts with Marco, he listened intently. "You've done everything you can for them," he said softly, "but you need to put yourself first. Your happiness matters too." "I know," I replied, feeling a sense of resolve building within me. "But it's hard to ignore their struggles. I want to help, but I can't lose myself in the process." "Then don't lose yourself," Marco said firmly. "You have every right to set boundaries and prioritize your own life. You're not responsible for their choices." As the days turned into weeks, I continued to focus on my work and my relationship with Marco. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, one that was rooted in my own happiness rather than my parents' expectations. But as I prepared for the next phase of the rebranding project, I felt a storm brewing on the horizon. My parents were still grappling with their issues, and I could sense that this was far from over. Then one day, I received a message that would change everything. It was from my mother, and the urgency in her tone sent chills down my spine. "Lily, we need to talk. It's urgent." I took a deep breath, feeling the knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I glanced at Marco, who was watching me with concern. "What do you think it is?" I asked, my heart racing. "I don't know, but whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone," he said, taking my hand. "We'll get through it together." As I prepared to face my parents again, I felt a surge of determination. I wouldn't let their chaos pull me under. I had fought too hard for my independence, and I was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. When I arrived at their house, my parents were waiting, their expressions grave. "Thank you for coming, Lily," my mother said, motioning for me to sit. "We need to discuss what's next." "What's going on?" I asked, crossing my arms. "There's been a development," my father said, his tone serious. "We've received a notice that we may face criminal charges due to the ongoing investigation." The weight of his words crashed down on me, and I felt my heart race. "What does that mean for you?" "For us, it means we need to prepare for a potential legal battle," my mother said, her voice trembling. "We need your help more than ever." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. "I can't keep doing this. You're asking me to step in and save you again, and I won't be a pawn in your game." "We're not asking you to save us," my father insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. We need your insight and support to navigate this situation. I'm done being your safety net, I said, my voice steady. I can't keep sacrificing my happiness for your mistakes. As I stormed out of their house, I felt a mix of anger and relief. I had stood my ground, but the weight of their expectations continued to haunt me. I was determined to protect what I had built with Marco, no matter what. As I got into my car, I felt tears prick at my eyes. I had fought so hard to carve out my own path, and I wouldn't let my parents pull me back into their chaos. I was ready to face whatever came next.